When most people think of war and its casualties, many think of men on the battlefield. But here in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is well known that women and girls were and still are among the first victims of armed conflicts that have rocked the country for decades. And one of the weapons of choice during those conflicts are rape and sexual violence against both women and men. Meanwhile, currently in Ethiopia, the same claims against Eritrean soldiers are reaching a crescendo, with accusations of rape against both women and men in the Tigray conflict. All this is happening as gender-based violence has reportedly intensified during the COVID-19 lockdown. 243 million girls and women between the ages of 15 and 49 worldwide were subjected to sexual or physical violence by intimate partners in the past 12 months. We'll take a look at this and more on today's program. Hello, I am Anastasia Tudieshe, and this is Our Voices. Here in the DRC, President Felix has declared the state of emergency in the eastern provinces of North Ituri and Kivu in April, raising further concerns about violence against women in parts of the country where armed conflicts have been going on for decades.
In our country, we have been experiencing atrocious violence for years, and the bodies of the women were used as weapons of war. I keep telling myself that the human that people are supposed to have within themselves, it has really disappeared, and it led to them allowing themselves to harm others.
Tatiana Mukanire embodies the concept of resilience.
Ladies and gentlemen, to be raped is synonymous with many, many hurts. It is to be dead in one's flesh, one's soul, with a broken and irreparable heart.
Although she can't have children because of a rape she does not want to talk about, she, along with other rape victims, is the force behind the DRC Female Survivors of Sexual Violence movement, formed in 2014. Their initiative has drawn support from the Nobel Prize winner and surgeon, Dr. Denis Mukwege. The sisters, as they call themselves, advocate for a better understanding of their challenges, and now their cause is attracting new friends.
For the first time in human history, the Global Fund for Survivors is creating an opportunity to change lives, and to change lives not through assistance, but through reparation. Interim reparations, because we want to say here that we are aware reparations are the responsibility of the state. We are acting as an interim just to show the Congolese state that it is possible to implement reparations.
Reparations, not pity, says 31-year-old Thérèse Makaba. She works daily with survivors of sexual violence. The survivors have organized a roundtable in Kinshasa, gathering NGOs and government officials to launch a reparation fund and presenting their plan for effective reparations, a 5-steps program that includes financial and psychological aspects. The fund would start implementing the plan before passing the responsibilities to the DRC authorities.
We heard the head of state speak out in favor of promoting justice and respect for human rights, but also reconciliation and, above all, increased support for the victims of armed violence in general.
De la réconciliation, mais surtout un soutien accru aux victimes de violences armées en général.
Abdoul Aziz Thioye, a representative of the United Nations Commissioner for the Human Rights, is hopeful. He says the DRC has invested in training on good practices, and new accountability procedures have been implemented within the National Police Force. He considers President Tshisekedi an agent of change because of his official gestures to support the betterment of the women survivors.
It is generosity, humanity on the survivor's part. You were a victim of violence. You say, I survived violence, so I want to work so that this can't happen to others. That's courage. That's resilience. That's generosity. That's humanity. And that's extremely important.
De la résilience, c'est de la générosité et c'est de l'humanité. C'est extrêmement important.
For Tatiana and her sisters, What is important, besides speaking up and seeking reparations, is their calling for an apology from the government.
Every day I ask them that the Congolese state apologizes. Just apologizing doesn't cost anything. That doesn't cost money. Just to speak in a microphone in a television station and say, we are sorry for everything that happened to you. And I think that would be the best reparations, the recognition, because if the Congolese state recognizes the wrongs that were caused to us, already that is a step. It can't happen if there is good will.
It is not every day one gets the chance to interview a champion. I had the honor to sit with Dr. Natalia Kanem, Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, better known as UNFPA, to discuss the Democratic Republic of Congo and what brought her here. Take a look.
UNFPA works to defend the dignity of women and girls. We work in Congo specifically to assure that mothers don't die while giving birth. In particular now, I'm also very interested in how women are coping with what I call the second pandemic of gender-based violence. And it's the harshness of violence. And this is why I am very pleased to be here to learn about the strategies that the country is using to make sure that the dignity of women is protected.
You probably have met with Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Mukwege. What do you take away from this meeting? I see a bright smile.
Yes, absolutely, because you're right, Anastasia. He and I shared a particular discussion around wanting to interrupt the creation of danger for women so that slowly his work with repairing damage will no longer be necessary. So UNFPA, working with the Panzi Foundation and with others in that community, are looking for ways of preventing the disaster, if you will, of fistula, of gender-based violence, of rape in conflict, so that it will no longer be necessary for us to join hands to do the work of surgical and mental repair.
DRC is not the only African country that has issues with gender-based violence during conflicts. So here's my question. Do you think that Africa has a deep-rooted problem with gender-based violence? Or do you think that it might also be an educational and health issue? None of the above? All of the above?
Well, these are very profound questions, and this is exactly the question that I need to engage with, you need to engage with, the audience needs to engage with. We also need to speak out loud about these issues because they've been swept behind the curtain for many years to the detriment, and women and girls suffer because of this. Yes, this is an African problem and we need to own up to it. I happen to be an Afro-descendant from Latin America, so I can tell you it's a problem in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Asia, in Europe, and the world over. Sadly, the roots of gender-based violence and disrespect for women is probably an age-old phenomenon. But in this time, with the type of young people that we have in Africa, they want to change the tide of history, and I think that they will.
Would you have one or maybe two little story of hope to share with us?
I met one of our staff who goes by motorcycle. Well, first she takes the transport to the town. Then she has to take the motorcycle down the path. And for the last few kilometers, she has to walk until she gets to the village. And you should see the reception that this lady gets when she arrives. She's one of our midwives. And it tells me that our work is appreciated. It tells me that communities want to work together so that women have a good experience, so they have a happy life.
Thank you, Dr. Kanem. Well, comparatively, the situation in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region is dire, according to the UNHCR. The aid agency says the conflict has displaced at least 4.5 million people, with a significant rise of sexual violence and no signs of an Eritrean troops withdrawal. We spoke with VOA's Heather Murdock about the latest situation on the ground.
In the past few months, hundreds of women and girls of all ages have come forward with complaints that they were raped by soldiers and as part of the war. We met some of the women in a health center in Makaba. Some of the problems that they're experiencing are extreme physical pain and injuries. Some people are entirely hospitalized. Also dealing with preventing HIV and unwanted pregnancy. So this kind of help is available as well. And also mental health help and help dealing with their families, because there is a lot of stigma surrounding rape here. But one thing that is important to notice that every healthcare professional we talked to about this had to say was that for all of the people that make it to the cities and to the healthcare centers, there's many more that don't. They say the patients will tell them there's many girls in my village that were raped, but only I got to make it to the city for help. And there's many reasons for that. One is that there's not healthcare centers in the countryside very much anymore, because most have been looted and many have been damaged, some both. There's also many roads are closed, transportation unavailable, and fear of repercussions. There's a lot of that. Women are afraid to come forward because they were raped, as they say, by authorities.
We're taking a short break, and when we come back, we'll take a closer look at the number of sexual assaults that go unreported and how it is tied to fear and stigma among the victims. That's coming up next. Don't go away. Welcome back. You are with Our Voices. Kenya's Department of Gender says reported cases of gender-based violence have nearly quintupled during the COVID-19 pandemic. But campaigners note that stigma and fear of reporting abuse means the number of cases that go unreported is many times higher. Victoria Amunga reports from Nairobi.
Kenyan Jackline Karemi recalls the day in April when her partner of nearly a decade suddenly accused her of having an affair and then attacked her.
We wrestled. He was trying to strangle me and pull me back to the bedroom so that he could lock the door. But I managed to get out of the room. He wanted to push me off the 5th floor. I hit him. Then he started slashing my face and head with the Maasai sword.
Karemi's was among more than 5,000 reported cases of gender-based violence in Kenya as emotional and work stress mounted during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's nearly 5 times the number of reported cases in 2019, according to an April survey by Kenya's Department of Gender. But Kenya's women rights campaigners note the vast majority of cases go unreported.
Reporting will either cause shame. I'll fight with my parents. Another thing could be that nobody will believe me because this person is a reputable, could be a chief, could be anybody. So this person is reputable in this area. So a lot of trust has been lacked, especially with the reporting system, because people really, most of the victims believe they are not going to be heard.
To encourage gender-based violence survivors to speak out, Kenya's women rights defenders hold open forums.
The reason why we're having this fellowship is to try to bring more women human rights defenders and activists and feminists that are able to talk against any form of violence against women and girls and any form of violence when it comes to human rights violation.
Kenyan authorities are running a campaign called Komesha Dhulma, meaning Stop Violence in Swahili. The goal is to stir the public to report cases of gender-based violence.
For us to achieve, even to start talking about it, to make it open, for people to come out, for women to come out, we have to have a holistic approach on how do we indeed deal with gender-based violence. dealing with it is not taking people to court alone or fighting it the way we want to fight it. We have to go back even with the church, because all of these people are people who go to church, some of them who go to the mosque.
As COVID-19 continues to batter families, gender-based violence survivors like Karemi can only hope more people speak out against what many now call a pandemic within a pandemic. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
VOA's Megni Shikoye had an opportunity to talk to Agnes Odihambo, senior women's rights researcher for Human Rights Watch, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Agnes discussed why women are afraid to report sexual violence crimes, the need for justice, and how to help survivors heal and move on with their lives.
Many women or many survivors, including women and girls or even men and boys, are not able to report the violence for many reasons. One is the stigma attached to being, say, a survivor of sexual violence. Many times women feel like they were to blame, or women are also blamed for being raped. So that stigma itself is really a big challenge. The other challenge is that in Kenya particularly, the citizenry don't have a very good relationship and experience with police. In fact, police themselves have been perpetrators of sexual violence, including around times of elections violence or other times of crisis. So women really do not have that trust and confidence in the police, that police will listen to them when they themselves are sometimes the people who harm them. But there are also practical cases of where women just don't have the resources. Say, for example, right now during the COVID crisis, where we are hearing about increased cases of violence against women, women already are struggling to feed their families. So even just having, that 100 shillings to get on a matatu or a bus to go report the case to the police can be very challenging.
Are there ways to go around this challenge?
Of course, there are ways. One thing really is also to create awareness about the importance of reporting sexual violence. For example, in cases of rape, it's really important that they report and seek help within 72 hours so that they can get the right post-rape care, but also to just get help and treatment for the injuries. I think also holding law enforcement officials accountable is really important, because they are really like a weak link in terms of justice for survivors of sexual violence in Kenya. But I think generally dealing with communities to prevent cases of violence, of course, is the long-term and the most, necessary solution to all this.
Women in war zones continue to suffer from sexual violence. What has to be done to stop the suffering of women and girls in conflict zones?
So it's a sad reality. The way sexual violence is used to intimidate, to terrorize, punish groups or communities. And in terms of what you're asking, when will it end? I don't have an answer to that, but if what we've seen so far is anything to go by, in terms of we are not seeing proper responses to prevent or to even respond to such violence from governments, then it's not going to end anytime soon. Because if you have an environment where, say, militias or military and other security officials, or even just ordinary citizens are committing rape in the context of violence, not only actually just violence of conflict, but even during times of peace, and nothing is being done to them in terms of being arrested and being prosecuted, then it creates an environment of, so what, I can do it and get away with it and nothing is going to happen. So what is going to stop the other person from thinking that, we're having this conflict, we can rape women? But I think every effort should be made to make sure that cases are documented, where it happened, who the perpetrator, witnesses, who are the women, because, there are things such as, prosecuting commanders or people in authority, even where you're not able to identify who is the individual that committed this rape. So the biggest problem is documenting. And that is where you see there's been some efforts at the international level, for example, some of it led by the UK government, to develop protocols for documenting sexual violence in the context of conflict. Because without that proper documentation, then it becomes very difficult to hold people accountable for what has been happening. And when there's no accountability, then there's nothing to deter people from committing those crimes in the future.
Thanks, Simengnish. Technology seems to be the solution to reporting sexual assaults in Nigeria, where reported rapes tripled during COVID-19 pandemic. A Nigerian programmer has created an application for rape survivors to report the attacks and seek help while avoiding stigma. Percy Debang reports from Yola, Nigeria.
22-year-old student Angela Felix, not her real name, says her cousin raped her during last year's pandemic lockdown. Too ashamed to tell her family or police, she instead considered suicide until she stumbled onto a mobile application that probably saved her life.
What got my attention with the app was the fact that I don't need to be in touch with the person before stating my case or getting help. So I actually decided to try that, and then I downloaded the app, I stated my case, and you could imagine, like, immediately I got help.
The Smart RR application, launched in October, removes the stigma of reporting rape in person and helps survivors to get counseling and support, says creator Diruk Samuel.
Simply kind of solving the issue of stigma, because you can report to a service provider and you can be in contact with the service provider with necessarily, without nobody knowing that you've asked for help from someone, except you, the service provider, and perhaps the perpetrator that knows what happened. So with that, it increases reporting.
The UN Children's Fund UNICEF says 1 in 4 Nigerian girls and women have been victims of sexual violence. But only a few thousand rapes are reported each year across the whole of Nigeria, a country of more than 200 million people, meaning countless thousands of rapes going unreported. That's shackling the fight against rapists, say activists who hope the Smart RR can help.
There are so many referral channels, but we discovered that the Smart RR is easier. Guiding principles are inclusive. The need for confidentiality is there. So you can't even use it without the consent of the survivor.
While better reporting should help, critics say Nigeria's legal system still fails most rape survivors.
The issue of conviction is a big issue, and it's a big step for us. If we can have a conviction, it will serve as deterrent to others. That will minimize the cases of rape.
Despite the jump in reported rapes during the pandemic, Nigeria's National Police Force said last year there were only 103 convictions nationwide. Percy Dabang for VOA News, Yola, Nigeria.
Do you think a mobile app can help a survivor of sexual violence or report a crime? Let us know on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices. And we also are on WhatsApp. Our number is on your screen. When we come back, Simengnish will join us again to bring you our Women to Watch segment. Stay with us.
We're bringing women's voices to the conversation, and more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment.
Here in Kinshasa, campaigns to raise awareness against the spread of coronavirus are common, but getting that information to people who have no access to water, electricity, or money can be a challenge.
We are here at Kalerwe Market in Uganda, Kampala, where in this whole market, women are crying out for their situations to change.
For women, it will be better for us.
I think a big thing for me is just being able to say that when these protests are happening, does it turn around into policy?
Our kids are raped every single day.
This movement got the government to listen. It really was powerful because it showed what is possible when men and women band together and say, enough is enough.
It's not necessary anymore to climb on a car. I can be in any place to cheer with the people.
Welcome back. This is Our Voices, and it's time for our Women to Watch segment. Our Voices' Thioye introduces us to a singer and activist in Botswana whose song Saying No to Rape strikes a chord. Thioye, it's all yours.
Thanks, Anastasia, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to bring you this week's Women to Watch segment. Lawmakers in Botswana, a country with a high and increasing rape cases, recently set up a committee to address the problem, and they plan to establish sex offenders registry. But campaigners like rape survivor Refilo Moki say these actions don't go far enough. Mukendezi Dube reports from Gaborone.
Singer and activist Refilo Moki took self-defense lessons after she was raped in 2017. Last year, her emotional wound was reopened when her little sister was also attacked.
Just after my little sister was raped, and it took me back there, I felt like it's a curse or something, but at the same time, I'm like, let me do something positive out of this.
Moki leads a Say No to Rape campaign in Botswana, where reported cases have soared in the last few years. Authorities note pandemic restrictions have increased gender-based violence, and this year announced a committee and sex offenders registry to address the problem. But activists say more than policies, they need action.
We've had inquiries in the past. There have been findings, but then there's never been implementation of those findings. And Botswana has signed and ratified some of the legal instruments, but they are not implementing. So that is the challenge that we're having as a country.
Botswana's rape survivors say police don't take their ordeal seriously, and cases often don't make it to court. To address those problems, authorities say they are piloting gender-based violence units at police stations and special courts to fast-track their cases.
Dedicated this song to prove you wrong.
That raises hope that the voices of survivors like Muki could finally be heard. Mkondisi Dube for VOA News, Gaborone, Botswana.
An African woman, no means no, ain't gonna tell you twice. Ain't gonna tell you twice.
Moki is taking the pervasive rape culture by attacking it head-on among other peers. What do you think? Share your thoughts using our hashtag #OurVoices. Until next time, I am Thioye.
Thanks, Thioye. And this is where we end our show this week. Thanks to my colleagues on Our Voices. Thanks to everyone at Voice of America. I am Anastasia Thioye from the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kinshasa. Good day.